Good afternoon and welcome to today's lunch break with the Rabbi. Today is Thursday, November 5th, the 18th day of Cheshvan, as we continue getting ready for the week ahead of us, which is the Shabbos ahead of us, Parshas Vayera, continuing to read about Abraham. Today, we're going to merge the two concepts of what we are discussing this week. A, the portion of the week where we learn about Abraham, and B, our fascinating facts about circumcision, and we're going to merge the two together and learn about both of them. I have also, those that are watching on YouTube, we have put some subtitles now in the description so it should be easier to see what our discussions are about and to find them later on our YouTube channel. At this point, I also want to remind you about our class starting Tuesday nights, JLI, Secrets of the Bible, a fascinating class. You will learn more into this great learning about 6 stories of the Torah, learning their deeper meaning, content, and subtext, which you've never imagined is part of that story. Also, just want to remind you all, and some of you have gotten the text, we are just launched our raffle that will be held in January on $10,000 cash. So if you can help us out, purchase more than just one ticket for you, your friends, and your family, pass the word around so we can all be able to join and help support this vital cause. And now on to Abraham and circumcision. As you know, last week we finished off the Torah reading when Abraham was given the mitzvah of circumcision. And this week we begin where Abraham's recuperating from the circumcision. Have you ever been invited to a bris? And probably to a circumcision ceremony, and probably the answer is not. If you noticed, anytime your announcement goes out about a circumcision, it doesn't say you're invited to it. It would say we are happy to announce that the circumcision of our son will be this and this time. An interesting tidbit. The reason is why we don't invite people particularly to a circumcision is because being that Elijah the prophet and a circumcision is such a holy event, and you were invited and you didn't show up, we don't want it to be held against you. So we just let you know, and if you plan to show up, that's a beautiful thing as well. But what is a circumcision? Why is the circumcision so important? And what is it with Abraham that he gave it to every single one of us? So let's talk about circumcision first of all. Yesterday we started discussing about the concept of when a child was born into this world, the great celebration is the fact that we have the fusion of the body and soul. When does that fusion happen for the boy? Is at circumcision. As God tells us, and you shall remove the foreskin. The foreskin is the obstacle that does not allow the fusion of body and soul to come together. Once the foreskin is removed, then the body and soul are able to integrate with one another, and it is for that reason that at the circumcision, the child is given his Jewish name. Because what is a Jewish name? A Jewish name, by definition, is the concept as the soul doesn't need the name. The body doesn't need the name on its own. It's only what brings the soul and body together, and therefore the Hebrew name is of great consequence to the individual. What about girls, you may ask? Well, girls, the Talmud tells us that they are born as if they are already circumcised. What does that mean? You know, saying this thousands of years ago, the Talmud was ahead of the feminists in their time. The Talmud explains that girls, by nature, have a more of a spiritual incline because of the very fact that they don't have to have a certain object to be removed to have that fusion of body and soul. The girl, the moment she is born, has that fusion of body and soul, and therefore their name can be given immediately, and therefore their Hebrew name, which continues to solidify that fusion of body and soul, happens by girls immediately, while by boys it takes place only by the circumcision. And here's another fascinating fact. One of the things about giving a Jewish name is that though many people like to name it after somebody who has passed on or a great scholar, but the actual name that's given to the person is given by their parents with Ruach HaKodesh, with divine prophecy. It is for this reason that a name is of such great consequence. It is the only time that many of us are gifted with that gift of divine prophecy. I remember recalling a story which once somebody asked the Rabbi what they should name their child, and the Rabbi responded and said, it's the one time in your life that you have divine prophecy. Why would you give it away? This is a divine prophecy given to the person. But why are people given a specific name to certain people or after certain people? It is because the name carries such energy of the fusion of body and soul, is that we want that this child that we are naming should either have the characteristics, the great character of the person we're naming them after, or should be symbolic of what the name we're giving them. And for that reason, you will find that people were given the name Shoshana, like a rose, or like a bird, or like a lion, or like a deer, using different types of examples and metaphors that this child should grow to be like. And for that reason as well, there's a very common custom that if a person's life is in danger, they would add a name, whether it's Chaim or Baruch, which means life, blessing, refuah, healing, any such type of names, which would be a better omen for this individual. And we have found that many times when their name was changed, the characteristic of the person changed, and they were then blessed with a better luck or a better character, which then changed the individual. For that reason, many people try to avoid giving negative names which are characters of evil people. In the Torah, you would not to name somebody Pharaoh or Nimrod or anything of that nature of a negative person, as it should not carry over the negative character onto that person. But talking about fusion of body and soul and changing names, which segues into what we find in this week's Torah reading as well. Abraham and Sarah. Abraham and Sarah did not merit to have a child until their names were changed, where God added a hey to Abraham and a hey to Sarah. She was no longer Sarai, she was Sarah. And only then were they blessed with a child. But here comes something unique. Last week, God came to Abraham at 99 years old and told him to have a circumcision. Only after God came to Abraham and gave him the commandment of circumcision, and he circumcised himself and his family, only then do we start with this week, where God comes and appears himself to Abraham. Why only after the circumcision? Were the first tests of him jumping into the fire, destroying his father's idols, leaving his parents' home, not good enough that God should appear to him? Why only did God wait until he was 99 years old to give him to tell him about the commandment of circumcision? And here's what we find, the unique idea about circumcision from Abraham passed down to generations today. Some people ask, why would you give a child circumcision? Let him wait until he gets older, makes a decision if he wants to have his foreskin cut. Why do we do it? Brainwashing the child at a very young age. And here's what Abraham taught us. What was the difference between circumcision and every other commandment that Abraham followed? What was the difference between Abraham connected to God before circumcision and after circumcision? When Abraham did all the other things that he did, standing up for God, teaching monotheism, preaching to the world, those were all wonderful things. But he did them only because it was his own self-objective. He believed in monotheism. He believed he should preach it to the world. It was something that he understood intellectually and therefore believed in it in a principle and taught it to the world. And therefore he did whatever it took to be able to preach this principle to the world, even at times when he was told by God things he didn't understand. But nothing yet changed him as a person. There was nothing yet that he connected to something beyond his rationale. It was all something that he self-motivated, self-achieved. As we read in last week's Torah reading, Lech Lecha. He left his boundaries, he left his confines to be able to explore, but it was all something on his own that he explored, something that he has taken an understanding, a wisdom, an intellectual reasoning, and expounded on that. All of a sudden comes circumcision. At 99 years old, God comes along and blesses him with a child. What was his child's name? Yitzchak, laughter. What was the reason why he was named that child? God made a mockery, meaning that this is something which is not understood. It's beyond rationale. My relationship with God has now reached a level where it's no longer my intellectual understanding. It's no longer what I have achieved. It's all a gift. I've now connected with the vine. Once he now connected with the vine, once his name was now changed and he had the ability to reach beyond his intellectual capability, beyond his understanding, meaning now he has reached a level where his connection to God is no longer intellectual, but it's a divine innate connection. Now he was able to do circumcision. Now he was able to take something physical of his own body and remove the foreskin, and by doing a physical action, he connected to God. Because now his entire consciousness, his entire body became a conduit for godliness, and therefore, even by doing a physical act, that physical act became spiritual. Similarly to we today, after the Torah was given, where we can take a physical parchment and make it a Torah, take a physical piece of wool and make it tzitzit, take candles and make a blessing on it. Abraham was able to do that only once his name was changed, once he has reached a level of divinity. Only then do we have, as we begin in this week's Torah reading, as God appears to Abraham, because now he appears to a person who has reached a level that went beyond his intellect. Before that, there was no reason to be appeared to him because it was all self-motivated, nothing from above. But once he connected with circumcision, once his connection with God was divine, intimate, innate, then God can reveal himself to him. This is the unique blessing that every single one of us was gifted by Abraham. That every single Jew, every single one of us, consciously or not, has a divine relationship with God. We all can connect to God in many ways. But sometimes, because of what we've done, because of our upbringing, either nature or nurture, either one of them, has changed our reality and changed and obscured our vision and doesn't allow us to see the relationship to have with God. And what we need to do, metaphorically speaking, is remove the foreskin, remove the blockage, lift the lids off our eyes, and see the connection that God has, how God appears to us in every single day of our life, how the gift that God gives us every single day to be able to perpetuate and excel and solidify that relationship that we have with God. Every single day of our life, we have the ability to remove the foreskin. And God is telling us that divine connection that you have an inheritance from Abraham. Every single one of us has it. It's a question is, what are we doing about it? Do we realize it? Or are we going to wait for some out of character event to only realize our relationship that has always been there? This week's Torah reading begins, Vayera. God appears to Abraham. And guess what? He appears to every single one of us. And he tells us, I have 3 angels standing at your doorway. I have the gift of life, blessing, peace, waiting for you. It's only a question to open your eyes and see, notwithstanding all the challenges and the tumult the world is going through, the blessing is there. I may be destroying Sodom and Gomorrah on one side. I may have a desert on the other side. But for you, your relationship is tight, intimate, and eternal. The relationship that we have with God can never be severed, regardless of what happens in the world. The question is only, are you using that relationship? Are you intensifying that relationship? And are you reciprocating to that relationship? God is giving. He's waiting for us to just remove the foreskin and reciprocate. Thank you for joining me today. Looking forward. Hopefully we'll get together again tomorrow, right before Shabbat, to be able to have a quick, short thought on the Torah reading and on Shabbat. God bless you. Have a wonderful day. And remember that divine connection is there. Just reveal it. God bless.